Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have a guest in the studio today who is running for the at-large position for the 709 School District. Harry Welty, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure, Marcia.
Welty, I'm sorry, I said that a little wrong.
Like Wendell Willkie? My dad's favorite politician.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, let's talk about politics, shall we? The school board politics is what we're interested in today. Now, we have an election coming up on November 7th. You're running for the at-large position, and I would like to know and have you tell the viewers, why is it, Harry, that you want to give another 4 years of your life to the 709 School District, and what are some of the main crucial issues facing the district?
Well, the first flip answer is I'm crazy. But
No,
that's a flip answer. The real answer is I've found myself, to my own surprise, devoting myself to the Duluth School District for 40 years. I came here as a teacher in the Proctor schools. Was not terribly successful, but I come from a family of teachers and think public education is critical. And one way or another, I have been attached to the school district, either as a parent of children, or PTA, or as a candidate for, or an actual representative on the school board for the last 30-some years. And that's brought a lot of experience, enough experience so that I was quite confident in warning the community that putting all its apples in the new building barrel might cause it pain in the future, and I was proved to be correct. In fact, we might mention the Moody's investors report that just came out downgrading our bond rating as we go along in this conversation. But I'm just dedicated to doing what I can to keep our public schools in Duluth the very best I can. And I think I have the experience, the knowledge, the know-how to make that possible if we can dig ourselves out of a terrible debt that previous boards of the last 15 years have put us into.
Well, that is quite a opening. That's a very good opening. Would you mind telling the viewers the bond rating and how important it is to us?
Well, anytime we go out to borrow money for future needs, the bond rating is critical. If everybody's heard of junk bonds. Those are bonds that are very poorly backed, and anybody who invests in them is going to demand a very high rate of interest on those bonds because of the great risk. Now, ours are above junk bond status, but Art Johnston was telling me he thinks ours may be the lowest bond ratings of any school district in the state. And that means that if we do need to borrow money in the future, we're going to be paying through the nose for that borrowing. So this is not good for us in the future.
So then the only way to attain the money is to raise people's taxes and or go out there and try and find grant money. Although we don't have a grant writer anymore, they dispensed with that position. So leaves us kind of in a precarious position if you really think about it. So with your experience and hopefully returning a couple of others to the school district and replacing a couple will give us an opportunity to perhaps look at one large piece of school district property that had the opportunity of being sold and would have put back money into the coffers and stopped draining from the students, because that's where the money's coming from our last conversation before the primary. We're taking more money out of the fund for the classrooms, which means less teachers, less aides, less opportunities for the students, correct?
That's a mouthful. We did talk about the central sale and the fact that it didn't go through. That was $14.2 million, which would have covered 3 years and more of the transfer that we're currently making from the general fund to pay off these red plan debts. That was the devil's bargain that previous boards made when they ran short of money to pay for all the additions to the red plan. We cannibalized the classroom. And as I take a look at the last 20 years of spending for the school district, when I first was on the school board 22 years ago, essentially what we have done is we've eliminated $11 million of local tax money that used to go into the classroom. Now, it's only $3.4 million that's being borrowed from the current operating fund to pay off these debts. So where do we get it? Bill Gates is not likely to write us a check, certainly not a check every year, because that $10 or $11 million shortfall is annual. The sad fact of the matter is, for those people who are living in homes on fixed incomes, is the only real source of regular annual income is the property taxes. And we certainly have heard a lot of people complaining about the proposal by the city to raise some sales taxes that they feel that they cannot afford. The district has no option but to go to the taxpayers. Now, we also had a very interesting discussion last time, and I know what a tax-phobic person you are, Marcia. And even I think I impressed upon you just how dire the situation is. We have put $500 million of our community's treasure chest into the public schools, and we didn't set aside enough money to maintain these brand new buildings. And we, of course, had to fix every single building at the same time. We didn't do this bit by bit like somebody might put an addition on the house one year, wait 4 or 5 years till the family grows and put on another one. No, we had to do it all at the same time. And as I said, we've cannibalized what I consider to be about $10 million from the classroom. Now we have classes of 40 kids. So what do we do? I would say the penultimate thing to make sure that our kids get a decent education is to regain the trust of the community by being honest with them and saying, this is where we are. It's a dirty, rotten trick to come back to you again, but you're our only hope. Now, I would hope that we could put these decisions in the hands of voters rather than have the school board make these unilateral decisions to raise taxes. But that's going to require that we keep faith with the community and be honest with them, and that's what I hope to do over the next 4 years.
Well, as I understand the way the legislation went while I was monitoring the district, is the school district has the option of not going to the voters again, just like they didn't ask us when it came time for the red plan. And I guess we'll go back to my angst about raising taxes. It's kind of like at my storage business. I have to keep raising my rates for my customers. I could raise my rates to be potentially right out of the market. But what do you do when you have to pay an incredible amount of taxes? And that 339% increase the second year I had a business was like a truck hitting me on the freeway. I mean, 339% only for the Duluth Red Plan. And what have I seen? Failed promises. The classroom sizes are not smaller. The kids are not getting all of the different programs that they were promised. And like you say, now we don't have enough money for maintenance on these expensive new buildings. My goodness sakes, they're going to be in the quote unquote deplorable condition they were in before we had to remake them all over again. So I guess as a taxpayer, and I think that most people would say the same thing, if you're getting for your money what has been promised, like I promise quality storage units that are dry, as free from vandalism as possible, a lighted facility, paved roadway in there. These people are getting something for their money. I think every taxpayer should expect the same thing. I don't think you disagree with that.
No, I certainly don't. You know, you talked about your situation. This comes up when I go out. Yesterday I had a fellow tell me he was about to write a big check to my campaign, and then he found out that I've said I might raise taxes. And he said, no, put his checkbook away. And I don't blame him a bit. A couple of weeks ago I was going down Park Point, and I ran across a retired woman who told me that her home on Park Point had just been valued, upped by $160,000 in one single year. And she was trying to figure out how she was possibly going to pay for taxes on a house that just went up by $160,000 in a single year. And of course, that's a dilemma for people in Park Point, because lots of millionaires seem to be moving there with their summer houses, and they're boosting the prices up. That's always a problem for gentrification. But I'm sensitive to that. And so I'm faced with the dilemma of trying to choose between people who are really adversely impacted by raises in taxes, and in the case of the Red Plan, they were ill-advised, and our absolute obligation to make sure that we give our children a good education. And it's difficult. It's walking between the jaws of death on one side or the other. We have to be honest. We have to be commonsensical. And I know I'm not going to make everybody happy. Somehow we've got to solve an insoluble problem, and I'm going to do my best.
Well, I know that when Ivy Foster had his short term here on the school board, he was looking for ways to fund different programs and whatnot by getting grants. And he had experience from the past school district that he was in. I had talked to him. And so, you know, I just throw that out there. I know it's going to cost money to find a grant writer and hire them, but, you know, that's a potential that maybe we really seriously need to look at. And as you go out and canvass for votes, I would just suggest that you say to the people that I will do my best not to raise the taxes, but like you told me, I mean, we can't let our buildings go into ruin, and we have got to educate what children we have left and be able to provide the programs, or we're going to have more kids going to other school districts. And that's a lot of our financial problem as well. When all these kids are going to other districts that are giving them what they need, of course we're losing, what, $10,000, $12,000 per kid as they walk across the division line in Hermantown and Proctor and whatnot and get their education that they're seeking. These are major problems that have come from like the Red Plan, and we're experiencing the backlash today.
We are, and about the $10,000 per student that leaves when a child open enrolls to another school district, the superintendent is right when he says that, well, we don't have to pay the cost of educating them. But we have built schools to accommodate supposedly 1,000 more kids, and we're having to pay them off. And every time we lose a kid, we lose the financial resources for teachers, and that diminishes our labor pool. And the costs of a school district generally are labor, not capital, although we have tested that here in Duluth with the $500 million we're having to fork out over the Red Plan for the next 20-some years. No, I'm just so caught in the mire here that I'm not sure where I was going to head off to, but we've got difficulties, and
well, I think you were trying to make the point about, well, the superintendent is saying, well, we don't have to educate because it goes someplace else.
You know, but that only holds up to the point at which you evaporate so much that suddenly are you going to have to close a school down? I don't anticipate that that's going to happen. People are worried that somehow Denfeld is going to close because it's the smaller of the two schools. I don't see that happening. I can see it continuing to lose additional students, but of course, if it becomes a school with only half the number of kids it was designed for, it puts us in the same position that we were in supposedly before the Red Plan ever got started, that we had all these empty buildings that required us to heat them, and my gosh, we had to downsize and make our schools more sensible. Well, we've unfortunately antagonized and disappointed enough parents so that they're taking their children out of our schools, and we're in the same ironic situation as before with suddenly in the high schools, Denfeld, more space than it was designed for because the clientele is going elsewhere.
That is a very sad situation indeed. And you know what? You still have to keep the building open.
Yes, we do.
You still have to pay for people to maintain it.
That's right.
You still have to pay for the costs of fixing things that need maintaining. So, I mean, yes, exactly, we're in the same situation we were before. And the people that shoved it down our throats, of course, have gotten out of town quickly and nowhere now to be seen, and didn't pay any taxes when they lived here either. So we won't mention names on that one.
Oh well, I would be quite happy to. But you mentioned grant writers a while back. I don't want to go. I don't want to go to the public and tell them, oh well, we'll just write grants and take care of all this, because you just are not going to cover up $3 to $10 million every year with grants that can be applied to your general operating. Grant writers have particular targets in mind. For instance, the last grant writer we had in Dr. Dixon's era, and he let her go, had written a grant for healthy schools. It was about a $3 million grant, $1 million a year for 3 years. My sense is the superintendent found this a nice pot of money to use for whatever was convenient for him, and maybe some was left over for the health. The grant writer herself told me that she kept the reins of the grant expenditures under her control, and the superintendent was not very happy about that, and so she ended up going to Hawaii, where she got probably a much better job, and we lost our last grant writer. But her grant for health cannot be applied generally to the general operation of the school district. And we haven't had a grant writer since. That doesn't mean that few people haven't written some grants. Every so often a grant comes to me, sometimes for $5,000, sometimes for $500,000, sometimes people like the Department of Education come in and say, here's a great opportunity to write a grant. But it's not for the general running of the schools. It's for some targeted job, and we need money just plain to operate the schools. Bus drivers, janitors, nurses, teachers, administrators, and that's not where your grant money gets spent.
Now, that's very interesting. I'm glad you explained that, because, yeah, I had this different opinion of grants. Thank you, Harry. You see, Harry has some knowledge about what's going on, and he's not a cheerleader, which I've heard is a prerequisite for being elected. Did you hear that?
I've made that claim, and I think some of the people who I've sort of hinted are cheerleaders wince at that characterization. I believe in optimism. I consider myself an optimist, but optimism has to be earned, Marcia. You have got to understand what's going on before you just simply go out and say, we'll write a bunch of grants, or we're going to be the #1 schools, because that would be a little bit like telling somebody in the Depression, telling their children, well, Santa Claus is going to come and he's going to bring you all sorts of goodies when they're about to be evicted. You've got to have some basis for that optimism and know how to work towards getting things to improve.
Okay, that's a good analysis of it. Yeah, but Santa Claus is not helping our school district. I haven't noticed him around lately.
I like Santa Claus too.
Yeah, well, whatever. So, what are the challenges that you feel, if elected, you will be facing in the next 4 years, besides the problem with our financial situation? We certainly have a disparity, and I remember how we were going to equalize the district out. Yeah. We haven't done that. In fact, it's gone terribly the opposite way, and so we have the western side of the city having less well-educated students than we have on the eastern side. So this seems to be a major problem, and where are we in that picture? I know at one time we were at the bottom of the list. Are we still down there, or was the last school year a little bit more productive and we actually gained some points?
It depends. There are all sorts of metrics and measurements. Donna Krivogorsky, who I would love to have join me on the board, has found a statistic in which our testing for our students placed us 278th at in the bottom third of 400 and some school districts in the state of Minnesota. That's not a good metric, but I would say the disparity between East and West is a top consideration. Right now, to keep class sizes low, we are taking compensatory aid money that is raised in the poorer Western schools and spending it out east to keep class sizes down. Now that's good for the Eastern schools, but as you pointed out, the Western schools have a larger population of kids in much greater need. And we have to address things like that, and it's going to cause pain all around. But I'd say the big issue is winning over the public. We want to have a sense of optimism about our schools. With that sense of optimism and progress, we can make successful appeals for the public to help us out. And I don't think we should try to shame people. I don't think we want to necessarily plead poverty. What we have to do is give the public a sense that the school district understands its dire situation and is thinking through the steps it has to take to make progress to get us back to where I think we were when I was first on the school board, one of the best school districts in the state of Minnesota, which at that time was, I think, one of the top education states in the nation. But it's going to be a slow, difficult slog, but you got to make progress, just like when you're climbing Mount Everest. You know, when you get up to 24,000 feet, you need to have a little oxygen to keep taking one step after another, and that's where I plan on being for the next 4 years. And 4 years is not very long with another 12 years of red plan payments beyond that facing this district.
Wow, it's hard to believe. How many years have we been in the red plan already? It's hard to believe that it's been that long. About almost 10 years, isn't it?
Well, 2007, we had an election in which the public had an opportunity to elect a school board that might have put the brakes on the red plan a little bit, because I was one of the candidates.
And so was I.
And those brakes were not applied because the people who knew that this plan was for our children won the day. And now our children are paying the consequences for their success.
And their children, and their children, and their children.
If we don't put a stop to it and turn things around.
Well, you mentioned the taking of the compensatory funds from the western side of the district and using them to keep the class sizes smaller in the eastern. I remember before I quit monitoring the district, I remember the meeting where all those people came and wanted to have answers to their questions. I'm sure that to this day they probably have not received any answers, just like they weren't given answers when they came in mass on other subjects as well. And I think that there is a feeling of people in the district that what's the point? Why spend my time talking to these people when the only time they jump and do anything is when it will look good for the schools? Like I remember sitting there and a guy asking to have equestrian program out at Denfeld. And I'm thinking, okay, let's see, how many kids own a horse or ride a horse to school? And this should be part of the program. It's just like, there's some things that, to me, they don't make a lot of sense as to why we're doing them, but yet we are spending the time and the money doing them, and we're not answering and getting at the real needs of the public. And I know you have no control over that, because it doesn't matter what you vote. It's what the decision is made by the superintendent, and so I really have my question about
Marcia,
why we keep going down that road.
The school board is the person that hires the superintendent, and he is our only employee. And so it's not as though the school board does not have some authority in the running of the school district and some oversight in the running of the school district. Whether it exercises that oversight is entirely different. And a quick aside, you mentioned how many people have horses. My grandmother, who was a very successful and beloved teacher, when she was a little girl, she used to ride her horse to a grade school, and then she'd hop off and the horse would trot on home. So I don't want to lose any of the horsey vote in this election. Your larger point was about fatalism. And fatalism is when you give up and say, I can't do anything. And it is so tempting when you look at the problems that have bedeviled the school district since the red plan rolled out, to shrug your shoulders and say, there's nothing that can be done. I am constitutionally unable to be fatalistic. I believe you always have to work at problems. That doesn't mean they all end at one time. Abraham Lincoln, my great hero, is credited with ending slavery. That does not mean that we don't have some echoes of the problems of that era that still bedevil us. And it doesn't mean that in 30 years, the red plan won't still have echoes that bedevil Duluth of 30 years from now. But by gosh, you're never going to succeed if you give up. And I'm not giving up.
Good point. I'm glad you spoke in that way, because I haven't given up either. I've backed off from monitoring the district, but then they film everything now anyway. But I haven't.
Thanks to some of us on the board who want transparency.
And I appreciate the fact that you got that. I mean, I'm sure that was a tough argument to get across to those people, but you persevered and you got it done. And you know, just a few minutes to wrap up here. I'm not a fatalist, but I do think that too many people out there that have tried have been turned off. And so your message to them, I hope, resonates with people like myself and others out there, that we have to keep trying. We can't give up. And so I appreciate the fact that you're not giving up. And after some of the things that I saw happen in that school board room, it takes a strong backbone to be on that board. It really does, because it's like banging your head against the wall. And
you know what the guy who banged his head against the brick wall said to somebody who asked him why he did it?
No, I don't.
It feels so good when you quit. And you know, the decision for me is up to the voters. I believe and cherish voters and their decisions. Sometimes they make decisions I'm not happy with, but it is their right to make those decisions. And you know, if I should not be elected, I'm quite willing to turn over the problems of the Duluth School District to someone who would take my place. And I might take a rest at age 66. I don't know that I want to keep fighting for the next 20 years for a seat I can't win re-election to. But this election will determine whether I go full force into trying to fix these problems, or I retire and start writing a history of something important.
Well, let's hope that the voters out there remember they need to go to the polls on November 7th. Open polls from 7 till 8. In some of the outlying districts, I talked to somebody the other day, well, I don't have to vote. I said, you're in the Duluth School District, you need to go and vote. And some of the townships don't understand that. So I'd like you to remember, it's now in your hands what you do on November 7th. Let's try and change the direction of the district. Many people are angry and they're tired of the same old, same old. We don't need cheerleaders. We need people who are willing to work. And Harry has shown that for many years now. And I appreciate your coming in today, Harry, and letting people know why you're available. And so
it's my pleasure.
Wish you the best.
Thanks for having me over.
Yep.